Today we're taking a deep dive into the world of the non-abelian fractional quantum Hall effect.
It's a mouthful, right?
It is. But trust me, the science behind it is absolutely incredible. It could have huge implications for fields like quantum computing. We're diving into a paper called On the Hilbert Space of the Chern-Simons Matrix Model, Deformed Double Current Algebra Action, and the Conformal Limit.
And this paper is fascinating. It takes a deep dive into some seriously complex physics. We're talking about systems where electrons are trapped on a 2D surface.
Okay.
They start behaving in ways that you just don't see in our everyday 3D world.
Right. It's like these electrons are suddenly part of a whole new choreographed dance.
Yeah.
And the rules of this dance are dictated by quantum mechanics. But what makes the non-abelian part so special?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. In these systems, the like the dance of the electrons or the way they interact with each other, it leads to some very specific and exotic states that could be the key to building more stable quantum computers.
Okay, so instead of just electrons flowing randomly, they're forming these organized states because of this quantum Hall effect.
Yes.
It's kind of like a traffic jam, but for electrons, right?
Exactly. Imagine electrons confined to a very thin, almost two-dimensional layer, like a sheet of atoms.
Okay.
Now apply a strong magnetic field. That's the setup for the quantum Hall effect. The electrons are forced into these specific lanes, like tiny highways, and their movement becomes incredibly precise.
And that's where the quantum part comes in.
Exactly. The behavior of these electrons in the scenario can't be explained by classical physics. You need quantum mechanics to understand how they form these very specific energy states.
Fascinating. So this paper uses a Chern-Simons Matrix Model to understand all of this.
Right.
Is that like a way to create a virtual lab for studying these electron dances?
That's a great way to put it. The Chern-Simons Matrix Model is a sophisticated mathematical tool that allows physicists to simulate and analyze the behavior of these electrons in a quantum Hall system.
So instead of having to create these precise conditions in a lab, physicists can use this model to tweak different parameters and see how the electrons react mathematically.
Precisely. And by manipulating this model, physicists can gain a deeper understanding of how these systems behave and what makes them so unique. One particularly intriguing aspect that this paper explores is something called level rank duality.
Okay, level rank duality.
Yeah.
Now we're getting to the good stuff.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit like a secret code for physicists.
Right.
What's the key to unlocking this one?
Well, imagine you have two seemingly different physical systems, each with its own set of rules and complexities. Level rank duality is this surprising link between them. It suggests that you can describe these two seemingly different systems using the same underlying mathematical framework.
So it's kind of like finding a hidden passage between two separate rooms.
Yeah.
You can suddenly see one room from the perspective of the other, even though they seem completely separate at first.
That's a really good analogy. And in the context of this paper, level rank duality allows the researchers to understand the complexities of the non-abelian fractional quantum Hall effect by drawing connections to other seemingly unrelated systems.
Wow, that's really cool. It seems like physicists are constantly finding these hidden connections in the universe. So how does level rank duality specifically help them understand what's happening with these electrons?
So what's fascinating is that by using this duality, the researchers can take a problem that's incredibly difficult to solve in one system and translate it to a potentially simply problem in the other system. It's like having a secret decoder ring for the quantum world.
I'm starting to see why this research is such a big deal. It's not just about observing these weird electron dances, but finding these elegant mathematical connections that might underpin reality.
Exactly. And these connections can lead to some really groundbreaking insights. For example, understanding level rank duality in the context of the quantum Hall effect could open up entirely new avenues for exploring things like high-temperature superconductivity or even quantum gravity.
It's like each new discovery is a door to an even deeper level of understanding the universe.
Precisely. And that's what makes this field so captivating, the potential for uncovering profound truths about the nature of reality itself.
Okay, so we've got these electrons in their quantum traffic jam, and we're starting to uncover these hidden connections between seemingly different systems. But how do physicists describe the specific states of these electrons? This is where the paper delves into something called ground states, right?
You got it. Think of it like this. Imagine the electrons can exist at different energy levels, like rungs on a ladder. The ground state is the lowest rung, the most stable configuration for those electrons. They naturally want to be in this state because it represents their lowest energy level.
So it's like the default setting for electrons in this system.
Exactly. It's the most relaxed and stable state they can be in. And in the quantum Hall effect, these ground states have some really unique properties, especially in the non-abelian case. They could be the key to a whole new kind of quantum computing.
Okay.
But to understand why, we need to talk about how these states are described mathematically.
Okay, I'm ready to dive deeper into that. Lead the way. And that's where things get really interesting in quantum mechanics, right? Describing these states isn't like pointing to a diagram and saying, there it is. We need a different kind of language, which is where these wave functions come in.
Right. Wave functions are how we capture the essence of a particle state in the quantum world. They're mathematical functions that give us information about the probability of finding an electron at a certain position. But it's not just about location.
Right.
It's about all the other properties of that electron that matter in this quantum system.
So it's not like we're saying the electron is at point A or point B, but more like we're mapping out a cloud of possibilities where it might be. And the shape of that cloud is important.
Exactly. And the shape of that cloud, or the wave function, tells us a lot about the electron's energy, momentum, how it's interacting with other particles and forces in the system. In these quantum Hall systems, the wave functions for the ground states are particularly special because they display an incredible level of order and complexity at the same time.
That makes sense. So how do we go about finding these wave functions? Is there some sort of quantum calculator physicists use? Or is it more complicated than that?
I wish it were as simple as plugging some numbers into a calculator.
Right.
Finding these wave functions is where the real theoretical heavy lifting comes in. Remember the Chern-Simons Matrix Model we talked about?
Yeah.
Finding the ground state wave functions often involves tackling some seriously tough math within that model.
So it's like solving a puzzle within a puzzle.
Exactly. And just like with any complex puzzle, there are different approaches and techniques. Sometimes physicists can use clever mathematical tricks and symmetries to solve for the wave function directly. Other times, it requires using powerful computers to run simulations and approximate the solution.
Wow, that's impressive. But it's not enough to just find these wave functions, right? We need to understand what they mean, how they describe the behavior of these electrons in the quantum Hall system.
That's where the real artistry of theoretical physics comes in. The wave functions themselves are mathematical objects, but it's up to physicists to interpret them, to figure out what they reveal about the physical world.
So it's like being a translator between the language of mathematics and the language of physics.
Exactly. And just like a good translator needs to be fluent in both languages, a good theoretical physicist needs to be able to move seamlessly between the abstract world of mathematics and the tangible world of physical phenomena.
That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned that the wave functions for the ground states in these non-abelian systems are special.
Right.
What makes them so unique? And how does that tie back to something like quantum computing?
That's a great question. And it leads us to one of the most intriguing aspects of this research, the idea of using these special ground states to create a new kind of qubit, the fundamental building block of a quantum computer.
Okay, I remember we talked about this briefly earlier,
Yeah.
but I'd love to dive a little deeper into how these electron states could actually be used to store and process information.
Absolutely. It all comes down to the way these electrons are braided or linked together in these exotic ground states. Imagine you have two electrons and you swap their positions. In the quantum world, that swapping or braiding can actually encode information.
Wait, so just by moving these electrons around, we can store information? That's wild. It's like a whole new kind of coding language. But how do we actually control that braiding? And how is it different from the way information is stored in a regular computer?
You're thinking about it in exactly the right way. It is a completely different way of thinking about information. In a classical computer, information is stored in bits, which can be either a 0 or a 1, represented by different voltage levels in a transistor, for example. But in these quantum Hall systems, the information is encoded in the topology of the electron braids.
Okay.
Meaning it's about how they're connected to each other, not their individual states.
Okay, so instead of zeros and ones, we have these intricate dances of electrons. I'm starting to see how this could be incredibly powerful, but it also sounds incredibly complex to control.
It definitely is complex, and that's why this is still a very active area of research, but that's also where the potential lies. These topological qubits, as they're called, are theorized to be much more resistant to errors than the qubits we have in current quantum computers.
That makes sense. If the information is stored in the way these electrons are braided together, then small disturbances or noise in the system are less likely to mess things up. It's like the information is more robustly encoded.
Exactly. That's the hope, at least. And that robustness is what makes these topological qubits so enticing for building more reliable and powerful quantum computers. But there's another aspect of this paper that I find even more fascinating. The exploration of what happens when we push these quantum Hall systems to the absolute limit. That's where the idea of the conformal limit comes in.
Okay, conformal limit. That sounds intriguing. What happens when we take these electron dances to the extreme?
It's like zooming out and looking at the system when the number of electrons becomes enormous, practically infinite. And when physicists do that, some really surprising and beautiful mathematical structures start to emerge.
Interesting. So it's not about the individual electron dances anymore, but about the overall patterns that emerge when you have a massive, complex system.
Precisely. And it turns out that in this conformal limit, the quantum Hall effect exhibits a remarkable degree of symmetry and order, and these symmetries can be described by some very elegant mathematics. And what's even more amazing is that these mathematical structures seem to have connections to other areas of physics and even pure mathematics that on the surface seem completely unrelated.
It's like these electron dances are giving us a glimpse into a deeper level of order in the universe.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the math is revealing connections that we wouldn't have seen otherwise.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's like we're seeing a reflection of a deeper mathematical structure that underpins reality.
Okay.
And one of the most surprising connections this paper reveals is the link between the quantum Hall effect and a particular area of math called symmetric polynomials.
Okay. I admit math isn't my strongest suit,
Right.
but I'm always up for learning something new.
Sure.
What are symmetric polynomials and why are they significant in this context?
Imagine you have a mathematical expression with several variables.
Okay.
And no matter how you rearrange those variables, the expression itself doesn't change.
Okay.
That's the essence of a symmetric polynomial.
Got it.
They have this incredible property of remaining invariant under permutations.
So it's like they have a kind of balance to them.
Yeah?
A symmetry that stays intact no matter how you shift the pieces around.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what's fascinating is that symmetric polynomials pop up in all sorts of unexpected places in mathematics and physics. They have deep connections to areas like group theory, representation theory, and even string theory.
Wow, so we're talking about a fundamental concept here.
Yeah.
Something that seems to touch upon many different areas of math and science.
Precisely.
Wow.
And what this paper does so brilliantly is show you how the tools and techniques developed to study the quantum Hall effect, a very specific and seemingly isolated phenomenon, can actually shed light on these broader mathematical structures.
That's incredible. It's like the quantum Hall effect is providing a new lens through which to view these fundamental mathematical concepts.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's what makes this research so exciting.
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding the quantum Hall effect in isolation.
Right.
What about using it as a springboard to explore deeper connections and potentially unlock new insights in other areas of science?
So it's not just about electrons dancing on a surface anymore.
Yeah.
It's about the elegant mathematics that seems to underlie their movements and potentially even the structure of the universe itself.
That's the beauty of theoretical physics.
Yeah.
It often starts with trying to understand a very specific phenomenon,
Right.
but in the process, we stumble upon these profound connections and universal truths.
Because like every answer we find leads to even more fascinating questions.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive, is there a final thought, a question you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah.
Something to ponder as they go about their day?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We've talked about the potential of these exotic quantum states for things like quantum computing,
Right.
but I think the most profound implications might be for our understanding of the universe itself.
Okay.
If something as seemingly obscure as the quantum Hall effect can reveal such deep mathematical connections, what other hidden patterns and symmetries are out there waiting to be discovered?
Right.
And what might those discoveries tell us about the fundamental nature of reality?
That's a truly awe-inspiring thought.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that we're just scratching the surface of what there is to know about the universe.
Precisely.
Wow.
And that sense of wonder, that drive to explore the unknown, is what fuels scientific discovery.
Well said.
Yeah.
To our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity. and left you with a sense of wonder about the hidden depths of the quantum world.
It's a strange and beautiful place down there.
It is.
Oh.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of the non-abelian fractional quantum Hall effect.
My pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring.